This is going to be essential question 6.1. It's kind of a long question because I actually grouped 2 essential questions together. How did the scientific revolution change the way Europeans viewed the universe and change the way Europeans viewed the government? So there's 2 things we're trying to find out, right? The scientific revolution is going to happen, and it's going to change the way Europeans view the universe, and it's going to change the way Europeans view the government. All right? Pause if you need to. We're going to jump right into this. All right, changing views of the universe. Here's that first part of the essential question. All right, well, if you want to know how things change, I always tell you, you got to know what we used to think before this time period. All right, so let's talk about some old views, okay? So there's this guy named Ptolemy that lived around 100 CE, between 100 and 160, okay? Remember, guys, that's, 0 would be like around the time Jesus of Nazareth was like born, and then, like everything after that is like, CE, right? Common Era. So Ptolemy lived a long time ago. And Ptolemy is one of these ancient sources that gives us our first real kind of view of the universe, all right? Now, Ptolemy had this idea that we call geocentric, all right? Geo means earth, centric means center. All right, so what Ptolemy did was he made a keen observation. If you look up at the sky, well, don't do it in the daytime because you might go blind looking at the sun. But if you look up at the sky at night and you watch how the sky, you stay out there for a couple hours, you'll see the moon go from one side of the sky to another. You'll see the stars rotate. So Ptolemy got this idea that, okay, everything's kind of going around in circles and it goes around, the earth. So he believed in a geocentric view of the universe where basically the earth is at the center of the universe and the sun and everything rotates around the earth. Okay? Now, it's the opposite of what actually happens, but it's what Europeans kind of believed. If they thought anything about how the universe works, that's what they viewed for a very long time. So this would be Ptolemy's view of the universe. Earth is at the center. And then basically, there's all these spheres that are outside of the Earth where the moon exists and Mercury and Venus and the sun, and they all exist in these spheres. And then outside the spheres where it says infinite stars, somewhere out there was where, God or the gods existed. Outside, heaven, we'll call it. All right, that's outside of all those spheres. Okay? So that is going to shape Europeans' views for a very long time. All right? So yeah, like I said, Earth is at the center of the universe. Everything rotates in spheres or circles around the Earth. And like I said, don't be so hard on him. When he looked up at the sky, it made sense. All right, now, over the years, the Roman Catholic Church had also adopted this view of the universe because it made sense to them. Now, I want to be clear. Nothing in the Bible, New Testament or the Old Testament, talks about the earth rotating around the sun or the sun rotating around the earth or anything like that. It doesn't mention those kinds of things. All right? But what happened was the Roman Catholic Church kind of took some verses out of context. For instance, there's a battle in the Old Testament where the ancient Jews are fighting some army. And Yahweh, the God of the Jews, basically pauses the day, stops the sun from moving so the day can last longer and the Jews can win the battle because the Jews are Yahweh's chosen people, right? So what the Catholic Church did was, they said, look, God stopped the sun, therefore the sun must be moving around the earth. All right? Now, like I said, that's a long stretch, but that was their idea. Now, this also fit the Catholic Church's ideas because think about it. If the earth's at the center, then the earth is special. Everything goes around the earth. We are special. Humans are special because we are on earth at the center of the universe and everything goes around the earth. It fit their worldview that God created humans and God created humans to be special and the earth to be special because we're at the center. Make sense? So, like I said, nothing in the Bible talks about that, but that's what the Catholic Church believed. All right, now, new views. All right, well, one of the first guys to really challenge this was Nicholas Copernicus, all right? He lived from about 1473 to about 1543. So, guys, look, Copernicus is born during the Renaissance, and he's going to die when the religious wars are going on. So do you see how the scientific revolution, it lasts a long time, okay? All right, so Copernicus comes up with what he calls the heliocentric view, all right? Now, using 15th and 16th century math, he's going to say, you know what? That doesn't really make sense that the Earth's at the center. He says helio-sun-centric. All right, sun's at the center. So this would be Copernicus's diagram on the right. In the middle, you see there it says SOL, sol, which is the sun. All right, now, Copernicus differed from Ptolemy because he said, look, the sun's at the center, but still everything rotates around the sun in a perfectly circular orbit. All right? So he gives us our sun-centered view of the universe. All right, now, Copernicus comes up with this idea, and you're going to see other people are going to build on this idea. Now, think about this. By doing this, guys, Copernicus is going against the Roman Catholic Church. And back in the day, that can kind of get you burned at the stake, right? Especially if you're saying something like, the Earth's not that at the center. That makes us not very special, doesn't it, right? Okay, so then you get Johann Kepler. Johann Kepler is a German mathematician. And what he does is, once again, he uses mathematics and says, okay, I buy into Copernicus' idea that the sun's at the center, but he looks up at the sky and he sees how the planets and everything moves, and he noticed this thing called retrograde motion, which won't make sense if I try to explain it to you. But what he notices is, with math, it doesn't make sense that everything's a perfect circle. He says everything actually rotates around the sun in elliptical orbits or ovals, all right? He also said the closer you get to the sun, you pick up speed as a planet. All right? So guys, if you remember anything about Kepler, elliptical orbits, and like I said, he's using math to calculate these orbits. All right? So they're starting to use these modern, scientific things like math. I mean, math have been around for a long time, but Europeans are really starting to rely on math to make observations about the universe. Okay? So you've seen we are changing our view from a geocentric, Earth-centered, to a heliocentric. Now, like I said, think about how the Catholic Church is going to view this. Wait, you're saying that the Earth is not at the center? Well, then you're going against what the Bible says. Now, guys, remember, they're not going against what the Bible says because nothing in the Bible talks about how anything revolves around anything, right? But anyway, that's what the Catholic Church is going to argue. Okay? Pause if you need to. We're moving on. All right, Galileo Galilei is another guy, and he is going to face the full brunt of the Catholic, well, not the full brunt because he's not going to get executed, but he's going to face the brunt of the Catholic Church, okay? So he wrote this work called Starry Messenger. It was published in 1610. Now remember, guys, the printing press that was invented in 1450, all right, that spread Reformation ideas everywhere. Well, guess what, guys? The printing press is going to spread these ideas everywhere too. All right? And Galileo is going to find his works on the forbidden, banned books of the Catholic Church. So, Starry Messenger. So he used math and scientific tools like a telescope to prove Copernicus's heliocentric theory. Now, Galileo also used a telescope. He didn't invent the telescope, guys. The telescope was actually invented about 100 years before in the Netherlands. Well, I'll be honest with you guys, ancient Muslims had telescopes, but modern telescopes, guys, that we think of were pretty much in the Netherlands about 100 years before. But Galileo is going to use the telescope, a scientific instrument. He's going to point it at the stars, and he's going to make scientific observations. One of the things he observes is there's mountains on our moon. Now think about that. So what? Mountains on the moon. Well, guys, there's mountains on the earth. So if you kind of look at the moon like the earth, well, hey, there's mountains on both. Then once again, it makes the earth less special, right? You go look at the Grand Canyon and you think, wow, this is amazing. Oh man, there's nothing like this. But you look at the moon and they've got canyons and mountains and all kinds of things too. All right, guys? So another thing he observed was Jupiter has moons. All right, he looked at his telescope, guys. He saw Jupiter, and he saw these 4 points of light around Jupiter. And they actually have more than 4 moons. But he saw these 4 points of light, and he said, hey, Jupiter has moons. So other planets have moons besides Earth. Earth is not special. So every discovery he makes, it shows that Earth is not very special, right? And once again, it's challenging the Catholic Church that humans, are special. God made humans, put them at the center of the universe, right? Another thing he discovered was that there are sunspots on the sun. All right, he actually looked at the sun through a telescope, which is a very bad idea. He went blind. So yeah, don't do that ever. Guys, don't even look at the sun without a telescope. But anyway, telescope. And he also, guys, made this argument that, you know what? We can probably figure out most things in the universe with math. Okay? All right? So think about this. like I said, he's challenged the Catholic Church. He's written the Starry Messenger. And what happens is the Catholic Church hauls him in front of the high officials at the Vatican, all right, where the Pope lives, right? And they put him on trial, all right? They condemn him as a heretic. You are teaching things that are not biblical, and they force him to recant. Remember what recant means? They force him to basically say that he's a liar and none of that stuff he said was true. Okay? So they make him do all of these things, all right? And then, guys, he's basically under house arrest for the rest of his life, all right? So that just goes to show you guys that the Catholic Church is still very serious about heresy. Okay? Plus, the Catholic Church has lost so much power because of these new Protestants coming around, yeah? All right, now, Isaac Newton is another guy that's going to change our view of the universe. So he wrote this book called Principia Mathematica, all right, which is the principles of math, okay? So here's what he decided, guys. Isaac Newton basically decided that, you know what? There's something to Galileo saying you can discover the secrets of the universe with math, okay? He's going to make an argument that the universe runs on what are called natural laws. And these natural laws are orderly, they're predictable, and they're mathematical. So what he's saying is, if you use math, you can figure out how the universe works. Now, one of these laws, guys, is the universal law of gravitation, which we would call gravity. Okay, you know the old story of allegedly Isaac Newton was sitting under a tree and an apple falls and hits him on the head and he's like, oh, gravity, right? Well, that's kind of what he's talking about, all right? So one of the laws of the universe on this planet anyway is if you throw something up in the air, it falls back down to the ground, right? So that's where he gets his universal law of gravitation, all right? That's not where he gets it, but that's one of the legends about him. Anyway, so everything in the universe is attracted by mass and gravity. So guys, basically he's going to argue the more mass something has, the more it attracts other things in space. All right? I'll show you guys an example when you guys get to class. But basically, that's how gravity works, based on your mass, and everything's attracted to each other. Okay? So look at this. Now you're getting Europeans that say you can figure out the secrets of the universe by using math. Once again, that's very counterintuitive to what the Catholic Church is teaching about the mysteries of the universe and, God knows the mysteries and only God knows the mysteries of the universe because he created it. So once again, if you're Roman Catholic at this time, you really feel like your power is being challenged. And this is not a good time to challenge your power because the Protestants are already challenging their power. Okay? Pause if you need to. We're going to move on. All right, now, not only are there changing ways of the universe, but there's going to be changing views of kind of how we think about science, all right? And like I said, one of the big things is Europeans are going to start looking at nature like it's some kind of machine, all right? Some later people are going to say that the universe is like a clock, okay? If you guys open up a clock, you can see how the gears work and you can figure out how it works, right? And that's like looking at the universe, okay? Nature is viewed as mechanical. The world is understandable, it's predictable. And this is a whole lot different than, say, Europeans that lived in the bubonic plague that looked at the world like, oh, we've got a plague, God must be punishing us. Let's whip ourselves bloody until he stops punishing us, right? Europeans are going to start saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we can figure things out. If we figured out how the universe works, maybe we can figure out how the human body works. Maybe we can figure out how to fix the human body. So do you see, guys, we're becoming more and more scientific, all right? But like I said, guys, that is a direct challenge to the Roman Catholic Church. So Francis Bacon, all right, is going to give us some of these new ideas about how we look at the world, all right? So he popularized this idea called empiricism. You might have heard the word empirical as in empirical evidence. Now, guys, the greatest way to describe empirical evidence, if you take science class, guys, it's data. Hard data. Like you have observed something and you have recorded data on your observations. All right? So you say, all right, out of this many times, out of this many trials, this is what happened. And that's called data, right? So he says, basically, Francis Bacon says, you have to use experiments to gain, you have to use experiments and you have to observe your experiments and the results in order to gain new knowledge. All right? Knowledge should be based on hardcore data. All right? Nothing else. Okay? He's actually the guy, and he's another guy that says this. Scientists need to start discovering new ideas because in the Renaissance, hold on, I'm going to sneeze. The Renaissance, Okay, basically, if you remember, they thought the Greeks and the Romans had everything right, okay? You fast forward to about 100 years, well, the Renaissance ends in about 1550, but you fast forward a little bit, and people are starting to say, you know what? The Greeks, that's old ideas. If we really want to figure things out, we need to come up with new ideas and not just keep going back to what the Greeks and Romans said. So he argued that scientists must discover new ideas. He's also the guy that gives us the basics for the scientific method. So if you've ever had a basic science class, you know you have to have a hypothesis, you have to experiment, you have to record data, you have to, make observations. I did that out of order, guys. But anyway, that's the scientific method, right? That's Sir Francis Bacon. Everything must be based on hardcore data, all right? So the next guy is René Descartes. Now, René Descartes is going to say something a little bit different, all right, rather than hardcore data. He says true knowledge comes through deduction, not hard data, empirical evidence. All right? Now, let me explain what deduction means. All right? Basically, it's like you arrive at a conclusion using your reason and your logic in your mind. All right? Now, there's a very famous saying accredited to René Descartes. And that saying is, I think, therefore I am. I totally misspelled therefore. Typing in a hurry, should have been an E there. I think, therefore I am. I'm sure you've probably heard this sometime in your life. Here's what it means. René Descartes said, look, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pretend I know nothing. I'm going to try to erase all my memory and I'm going to start from the beginning. So he said the very beginning of knowledge is this. I think, therefore I am. Translation, I think. René Descartes, me. I can think. Therefore I know I exist. And from that, you move on to other deductions. If I exist and my eyes are seeing you, then you must exist too. That's called deduction. All right? If I can hear your voice, you must exist, right? If I see that desk over there, that desk must exist because my senses are seeing it, and because I exist and I can see things. You guys see what I'm saying? You are using your logic and reason to come to a conclusion, all right? So he argues that basically reason is the basis for knowledge, not superstitious ideas. So because of Francis Bacon and René Descartes, Europeans are slowly going to start moving away from superstitious ideas of the Roman Catholic Church, all right? And they're going to slowly start coming to the idea of logic and reason and science, okay? Pause if you need to. We're moving on. All right, now the very last thing I want to talk about is changing views of government, all right? So there's two big people that emerge in this time period, and they are both English philosophers from England. All right, now, Thomas Hobbes is the first guy, and here's the deal. You got to understand a little bit about Thomas Hobbes. He lived through the English Civil War, so he saw the Stuart kings and Parliament kings butchering each other over control of England. All right, so if you know that about Thomas Hobbes, that gives you a little bit of context for why he wrote what he wrote. Okay, so he wrote this book called Leviathan, all right, in 1651. So if you don't know what Leviathan is, a Leviathan is an ancient mythological creature in Jewish mythology. It's in the Old Testament, the Bible, in the book of Job. It's basically like a big fire-breathing serpent thing that lives in the ocean or the seas, okay, Leviathan. All right, so it's a big, gigantic monster. And that's what Thomas Hobbes calls pretty much the government. A Leviathan, a big, gigantic, fire-breathing monster. Okay? So, here's what he said. Before humans had government, before government ever existed, basically, humans lived in this state where they were selfish, they act on impulse, all right, and they're violent towards each other. So what happened was, powerful people among the humans created this idea of government and able to control them. All right, now think about what that says about governments. Because humans are selfish and violent and we hurt each other, we need a strong government to control our impulses. So what kind of government do you think he advocated for? If you said absolute government, you're right. Think about that, guys. Because humans are selfish and we're violent and we hurt each other, we need a strong ruler like a king to control us. Yeah, does that make sense? So Thomas Hobbes is going to be very well liked, and his writing is going to be very well liked by a lot of European rulers that are going to argue and try to justify having an absolute government. Now remember, Thomas Hobbes grew up in the English Civil War, and he saw maybe Parliament being selfish and violent, therefore they needed to be controlled, all right? Now, let's talk about the opposite of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke. Now, John Locke didn't live through the English Civil War, but he did grow up in England, and he's another English philosopher. But here's what he said. He wrote this book called The Two Treatises on Government in 1690. Now, remember, Thomas Hobbes said humans are selfish, they act on impulse, they're violent, and they're horrible to each other. John Locke actually said humans are reasonable before they created government. They were cooperative, but there's always some bad humans that exist. So here's why humans created government. Not to control them, but they created government to protect our rights. You see, John Locke said that every human is born with 3 natural rights that cannot be taken away: life, liberty, and property. Now you might be thinking, life, liberty, property, that sounds familiar, but it sounds kind of wrong. Well, guys, when we get into later chapters, you're going to learn that when we write the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson is going to plagiarize John Locke and change property to pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is what most Americans know. Okay? But anyway, let's get back to this. John Locke said that when humans are born, they're born with the right to live free, and have property, all right, to grow crops on and, have a life, okay? So well, he didn't mean every human. He basically meant like white male humans. But anyway, everybody has these rights, okay? And you're born with these rights and you cannot take them away. So governments are created to protect our natural rights, not to control us. Basically, the government needs to kind of leave us alone and your only job is to protect us. Thomas Hobbes says, nope, governments need to control people because they're selfish. So do you see the difference between Hobbes and Locke? That's going to be a big thing and a big theme that we're going to have to understand. Now, John Locke also said, look, the government shouldn't be getting into your religious business. It should have no bearing on what you believe religiously. So John Locke is going to argue for religious toleration. So hopefully you see, guys, Thomas Hobbes is going to be a champion for absolute kings, and John Locke is going to be a champion for constitutional governments. Does that make sense? Okay, guys, that's the end of the notes. I'll see you guys in class.